I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:28 p.m. Isnaka, Panasalas, Kakita Panaquail, Seattle, Tashna, Nemo, Mosquito, Nihako, Justa, Panaquail. Thank you all for gathering here this evening. I acknowledge with my highest gratitude that we are on the traditional territory of the Salinan people, recognizing that we also serve in the territories of Samalas and Suminas First Nations, alongside our Métis and Inuit relatives. We have no transfer of items to the open meeting agenda this evening. Are there any additions, deletions, or change in order from trustees? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving the agenda? The agenda carries unanimously. Section 7 of our agenda is approval of the minutes. The minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting held on April 27th, 2022 be adopted. Is there a mover? Stephanie? Second? Tanya? Minutes record that Jessica is abstaining from the vote. I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the approval of the minutes? Seeing no objection, the motion is carried unanimously. Section 8 of our agenda this evening is the Section 72.3 report. The Section 72.3 report from the closed Board of Education meeting on April 24th, 2022, and the special closed Board of Education meetings on April 28th and May 4th, 2022 be received. Is there a mover? So moved. And a second? Stephanie? Is there any objection to the motion? Abstention by Jessica. Call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Announcements and reminders. The Education Committee meeting for June will be held on the 1st. Business Committee meeting will be held on June 8th. Regular Board of Education meeting will be held on June 22nd. And the following week, Administration Day, June 30th. Schools are closed as we begin our summer break. I would also like to take the opportunity this evening to acknowledge the anniversary of the Kamloops discoveries at the Kamloops Residential School. The public acknowledgement of residential schools has probably never had a more profound effect than this time last year. A conversation was finally being taken seriously in this country about what residential schools did and what they still do to survivors and their families. Residential schools are probably one of the darkest parts of our history as a nation and have created an immense amount of intergenerational trauma that many families, including my own, still look at today in recognizing how those impacts of residential schools, the Indian Act, and the way Indigenous peoples of Canada have been treated since the beginning of time and colonization. We walk differently in the world today than we did a year ago. And most certainly this district walks differently than it did 10 years ago with regards to education of Indigenous students. We acknowledge that an Indigenous way of knowing and being is equal to that of what some might call traditional ways of knowing and learning, what others might call colonial. If we accept that both of those ways of living are equal and we learn about both, we have the opportunity to walk in two worlds. By walking in two worlds, we help families break the intergenerational trauma chains. If we truly make decisions each time we come together that are about the children that we serve in our district, ha, man, our sacred children. That's who we found a year ago. So we continue to unbury, bind, recognize so that those spirits can go home. That's who we serve. That's who we're here to serve. Some children. When you look around society and you see all of the things that maybe might be wrong with the world, it's the children that are our future. It's the children that give us the opportunity to make the world a better place. And often they're the ones that show us the way. And so it's a great responsibility that our board accepts, supporting their education for future generations in all things, in all connections. It's important that we thought about that today. Just on our agenda to section 10, presentations. Natalie Smith, Schools Foundation Board. Welcome to Wheelam, Dan and Crystal.
Thank you. Making a difference, together we're making a difference for those kids as well, the kids in this district. And it's the partnership that the Nanaimo Leeson Schools Foundation has with the school district that allows us to reach into these kids' lives and make a difference. So Crystal and I are here tonight to share some what's happened over the last year, what kind of impact that we've had. Things have been changing lots, as they always seem to be doing. I'm gonna go through all the slides and do the slide type of stuff, and then Crystal's gonna do the fun stuff and tell you some of the neat stories that have been happening over the last while. For those of you who may not know, the Nanaimo Leeson Schools Foundation is a registered charity of its own type with its own constitution and bylaws. At one time, it was the Nanaimo Schools Financial Award Society back in 1982 until it was incorporated in 2008 as the current charity or society. We're a board of 10 community volunteers who each serve 2-year terms. However, 2-year terms sometimes can last 10 years in my case, and there's lots of people who have been committed to this organization for many years, and the board we have now, a lot of them have been around for more than the 2 years, and I anticipate a lot of them will stick around for many years to come because of the work that's done. We operate with minimal staff and resources. Here's our staff. And then we got some other help that happens around as well, but Crystal is what makes a lot of this happen. So I want to thank Crystal for that on behalf of our board, and you guys interact with her all the time. So how do we help? We do a lot of work developing and implementing efficient direct-to-student programs. It's the students that the foundation is here to serve. We serve them, not only the accomplished ones through scholarships and the ones that are finishing off their schooling, heading on to the next chapter in their lives, but also the ones that are in the elementary schools that may not have shoes, may need a hairbrush, may need anything that they might need that their peers might not even know. So that's an area where we can help out directly and confidentially, and Crystal will share some stories about that in a little while here. We allocate funds through the community, through our partners, and through lots of people who care a lot about kids in this city in order to help the kids. And we also encourage graduating students to head on to post-secondary education. We just finished earlier this month, and we're doing all the scholarship selections and the bursaries, and we always have a good time with the counselors from each of the high schools dishing out lots of money in this community. And we're very excited that next month we'll actually meet in the Port Theatre and be in person once again, giving that money out or giving those awards to the kids. So we have a bunch of different programs that we have. We have the Student Support Fund, we have Food for Schools, Music Initiative Grants, the Enhanced Learning Initiatives, and the Scholarships, Bursaries, and Awards. We're just going to go through a couple of these in a little more detail. The Student Support Fund is one of the ones that caught my eye when I learned about this foundation back when I was in Rotary, probably about 15 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, when I learned that there was kids that were only eating because they were being fed off the sides of teachers' desks. This sort of links into the Food for Schools later on. This is more the Student Support Fund that has been looking after this. So it looks after needs of the kids, whether it's food, shoes, clothing, eye care, dental work. There's a number of things on the screen there. that if there's a kid in need, we're able to jump in there and we're able to jump in there quick and help. Student Support Fund, 900 students received school supplies through the foundation this past year with a value of $90,000 that was donated through various donors that we have. Food for School program has grown immensely, and we have to thank you greatly for the facilities that you've been able to help us with over at Woodlands, because that's where the base of it all happens out of. And it is an amazing amount of food that heads out to the whole district because of that work. So we're able to provide food to support the school-based meals programs for vulnerable students. Schools we provide school breakfast, lunch, snacks to students every day. 1,200 students access support during their school day through the Food for Schools program. And a total value of $247,000 that the school district didn't have to figure out how to get, that was donated through Breakfast Clubs of Canada, as well as different local donors that we have connections with. And Crystal will talk about the Breakfast Clubs of Canada. We've made a real good relationship with them due to the work that's gone on, and they see a lot of value in the work that's being done here in Nanaimo. I talked briefly about the scholarships, bursaries, and awards. We were awarded 368. We had 368 applications. We awarded $375,000 and 125 district authority scholarships. And we're going to be having our district awards night in person at the Port Theatre on June 14th. So we're excited about that. A couple of other initiatives that we recently supported: the Farm to School, one-time $10,000 grant to help the farmer get things rolling over there at Woodlands to turn that dirt into something productive. So we're excited to lend a hand in that one. And then transportation. We have a lot of students that are trying to figure out how to get around town, and we're able to reach in and help them with bus passes. Looking ahead, we've all gone through a crazy time over the last 2 years. We've been trying to have a strategic planning session for 2 years to try to get all together going in. We had it all planned. We had the day set, and then what was it? The fuel shortage. The floods knocked out fuel shortage. All the district staff couldn't go anywhere, and we had to cancel the night before. That's how close we were on the last ones. So yep, and then various other reasons, but we're planning on finally having our strategic planning session in the fall. And what we really want to do is we want you guys to be involved in it. You know, Charlene was going to come and be part of that. We really appreciate that. But you guys have a connection that we need in order to help the kids, and we have connections to things that you need that we can reach the kids in ways that you aren't able by reaching the donors that we're able to. So we want to make sure that we have you guys a part of that planning session, and so that your objectives and your goals for this district line up with ours as well, and that we can work together to, as it said at the beginning, make a difference. I will now pass it over to Crystal for the more fun stuff. And thank you.
So I just wanted to share a couple of things tonight, and I'm always very appreciative to have the opportunity to come and speak and kind of give a little bit of feedback on what it is that we've been up to. And thanks, Sam, for presenting the numbers. It's interesting when we talk about the work that the foundation does and the number of schools and the number of students and this much money and all of these things. But really, at the end of the day, what it comes down to, Charlene, what you were speaking to is the kids, right? Like everything we do is directly in support of the students in our district, and from Ladysmith to Lantzville to Gabriel Island and everywhere in between. The perspective that the foundation has taken is that regardless of what school the student attends, if they have the needs, that it shouldn't matter what school they go to. And so we've taken a real district approach to the work that we're doing to create an equitable, sustainable programming and supports for not only now and during COVID and post-COVID, but indefinitely, that we're here to make sure that students that are facing financial barriers in particular are, that those supports are in place for them in a way that is really accessible and requires minimal time from school staff. We really recognize that our school staff are working so hard for the benefit of our students every day, that we've created programs and systems in place where we're able to provide really quick emergency response, really quick response to situations where families and students are requiring those supports. So, for instance, we have, graduations coming up and the grad fees. I hear it at ND on my all the time. please get your grad fees in, you know, if you don't get your grad fees in, you're not gonna, $80 is a lot of money. A lot of money for a lot of students and capping down in yearbook fees, it's costly. And so, I'm really proud of the fact that counselors at the school can identify those students. We give that responsibility to the schools. They know best. The schools know best. They know their students, and we can provide quick response. We don't take a means test. We rely on the schools for their best judgment on where those needs are, and so it's really accessible that way. You know, some of the things we hear about, you know, they're heartbreaking, right? Like the requests that we get for the little girl whose toes are literally worn through her shoes. You know, can we get her shoes? Students that want to play on the sports teams, and the athletic fees are too cost prohibitive for them to be able to play. So we're able to say, yes, get them their basketball shoes. We'll pay the fees. If there's tournament fees, those types of things that we can help. Gym strip is another one. You know, students, those extra sets of clothes can be costly as well. French class, doing a big field trip, the whole class is so excited and they're going. And again, they do some fundraising, but for a couple of families, it's just too much. And so students are very discreetly supported and they're able to go with their classmates. Nobody's the wiser. And one of the sort of humbling things that I've heard just recently was a young student, a grade 9 student who's living in a hotel with his father, really struggling, sleeping on a mat, which isn't even a bed. And, you know, the school staff came in, and how is a student supposed to be successful when they can't even get a good night's sleep? So we were able to, get them a cot and a set of a pillow and a blanket. And I had the opportunity to actually meet this young boy, and, you know, we were sort of talking. There was, the school's team was with him, and, you know, is there anything else that he needed besides, you know, a change of clothes and some shoes? You know what he said? I get a new hairbrush. Mine's gross and really old. That's why we do what we do, right? So, yeah. So that's the sad part of what we do and why we do it, and things aren't going to get any better, I don't think, right now for a lot of families. Money's tight, but the generosity of this community is mind-blowing to me. I had a phone call a couple of weeks ago from a retired, we started an alumni, we'll start with that. We started an alumni association. It's new, we're still trying to figure out what exactly is it going to look like, and what are we going to do? How are we going to engage our alumni, and that's past students, past school staff, in being a part of this foundation. And I had a phone call from a retired physician who graduated from NDSS. He wouldn't tell me when, but a while ago. And he went into forensic medicine, went on to have an extremely successful career. He's retired now, and he's established, we've had several conversations. It takes time, right? It's about relationships and understanding, and he has created an endowment in his family's name, and to support students who have had a bit of a rough go getting through school, those students who have shown real promise, have worked really hard, and he wants to invest in their future. So the conversation started about that and about the terms of this new bursary, because it's for financial need. And I shared a couple of stories around just some of the kids we're seeing, like some of the situations that we're seeing. And he said to me, if I put $1,000 check in the mail and address it to help, can you make that happen? And absolutely we can. And those students that are the recipient of the generosity of a young student who struggled in this district 30, 40 years ago, is coming around, and now, so having alumni come back in. I actually had a phone call, I was telling Dan while we were waiting, I had a phone call earlier today from a student from McGill who's a recent grad, a 2020 grad, and he lost his money, he lost his check. Please, can I, get my money? And we talked a little bit about how he's doing and what it meant for him to receive that award, and his thing was, I can't wait till I'm done because I want to set one up. He goes, I want to have an award in my name because it made such a difference. It helped him. It's not a huge amount of money. It was $1,000, but the fact that people actually believed in him enough to support him in going on was enough that he wants to come back and actually support other students like himself. So we have some big exciting things happening for the fall. We're doing our strategic planning. We have the food depot up and running. We're currently looking for a vehicle, a van. It's we've reached the point where we're borrowing Wolves and Fishes vehicle. It's a borrowed van that's broken down half the time, and they're so generous. It's an amazing partnership to work with Wolves and Fishes. We couldn't do what we do without their partnership. But we've reached that point now where we're looking at, how do we have the Anomaly Smith, like a Food for Schools van, to be able to raise the awareness around the community too, so that other people might want to get involved in helping. Breakfast Clubs of Canada, they've been a long-standing partner. When I started 7 years ago, we had a $12,000 grant that was divvied out. Now we received $69,000 in funding for the next school year. We received a $10,000 capital grant to help with our expansion of the program, and we've been chosen one of 5 in the nation for a pilot project where they're purchasing food on behalf of their partners. And today we just got our first delivery of yogurt, 80 cases. I did the math when you were there. It was like $2,400 worth of yogurts. Were delivered to the depot today, offloaded into our refrigerators and refrigerators, and will be delivered out to the schools for the emergency food programs that are happening across the district. So one of the things that Scott and I had an opportunity to talk briefly a couple of weeks ago, just very informally, was the foundation's really wanting to make sure that the work that we do continues to support the priorities of our district. And right now, historically, we started with scholarships and bursaries, and the student support fund and the food program has become a really important part of what we do. But we also want to recognize that there are other areas that we feel that will align with the work that the board has as its priorities. Initial $10,000 grant to the Farm to School project to support that work. There's other areas, and so I know we look forward to part of our process will be to determine what other areas should we be focusing on our community, because we have this incredible community of partners, individuals and businesses and funders that I know that will help us to be able to bring more value to the district and find ways to support financially partnerships to the work that the district is doing. And I'm really proud to be part of this district and proud of the work that we're all doing to support the students. And so I just want to say thank you for believing in what we do. And we are doing Dan mentioned we're doing the Fort Theater, which is really exciting. Our grad ceremony, we have 200 graduates coming and receiving district awards. And then each of the high schools will be also doing their own award ceremonies. And we get to host an in-person appreciation evening this year. For the first time in a couple of years, we have space at the Nanaimo Museum. It'll be a lovely evening, and I have invitations here personally to invite you, our trustees, and Scott, Tim, Dale, for all of your support, because we do appreciate you. We couldn't do it without the support that we get. So thank you. And as always, any questions, ideas, concerns, please reach out. I'm always a phone call or an email away. So thank you.
Thank you. Got my voice back now. Do we have any questions for representatives this evening? Stephanie, are we using these? I don't know if they were.
No, just talk really loud so people have a room to hear. Hello. I just actually would really like to express a deep gratitude for the work that you do. The last couple of years have really shone a light on the importance of it, and we're all having a little emotional moments here looking at the work that you do and the time you put in, and the board volunteering your time. It makes a real difference to the students, and I think in my work eventually that I used to do, the foundation was a shining star, and so just a real amount of gratitude for the time put into helping students get across the finish line. because it's a tough journey for students, particularly in this area, and so I'm just really grateful. And I do want to say, you know, I do really appreciate every year you come in and showing us those numbers. I think it's really important. This is my 7th or 8th one of these, and every year it's a really strong reminder of the important work we do, but also a reminder that helps center the work as a trustee when we're sitting here making really important decisions. Those numbers are in the back of your head about they help tell me stories about the students that we serve. So, you know, keep making this presentation. It might seem repetitive or redundant, or we're here saying the same thing, but every year it's a really shining, a stark reminder of what we do, and I really appreciate it. So I just want to express my gratitude for the time you put in all year and the time you put in to us.
I just.
Sorry about that. Just thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative, and what a rewarding job you have. And you're touching so many lives, and I knew that when I was working in the district, students that couldn't afford the prom tickets, you know, all those grad fees and everything like that. Foundation always came through for students, so much appreciated.
Any other questions? Jessica?
I want to echo what's been said, especially what Stephanie said. I have to admit, coming from well, it's been 4 years now, but coming from a privileged district, I don't think I fully appreciated how incredibly important the foundation is. And I've really grown to understand the not only incredible need for the work you do, but I really think that you absolutely are a reflection of what is the best stuff about Nanaimo. Because I've come to learn what is like really great about Nanaimo, and it's the people like you that care, that get out there and are willing to help their neighbors and to help give people a lift up. And I really want to thank you for your work, because it is so incredibly needed, but yet you do it so effectively and so beautifully and so supportively. And so I really value it, and I really value it. I really do believe that you're all representative of why Nanaimo is a really great place to live, is because there's so many people like you doing the work that you're doing. And so just my gratitude, because it's so incredibly needed. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's me close. Will not repeat. But you know what spending the time with us this evening, and I on purpose wanted you taking the time to do that. And to celebrate together. We're going to celebrate together in just a couple of weeks. In closing, I will just say, Aisha, CM, CIA. You can pass this to me if you want. Yeah, of course. All right, we're going to do public hands. Yeah. I hope to see you all at the event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to move us on in our agenda to 10.2. Our presentation this evening is on Bikers Against Child Abuse, BACA. And I'm grateful that you're here to spend some time with us this evening. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you very much, Charlene. My name is Ian Smith. I'm a business person here in Nanaimo. With Bikers Against Child Abuse, my road name is Reaper. I am pleased to have with me some of my fellow members from the chapter. Scully, who is our child liaison, Phoenix, who is our treasurer, Sideshow, who is our vice president, and Enar is one of our supporters. And as I said, I'm the president of the chapter here in Mid-Vancouver Island. So I am going to attempt to share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So welcome everybody. Thank you for having us. We really, really appreciate being given the time and the opportunity to explain who we are and what we do. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and something that everyone that is on here is very passionate about. We'll start with our mission statement. And it reads, Bikers Against Child Abuse, BACA, exists with the intent to create a safer environment for abused children. We exist as a body of bikers to empower children to not feel afraid of the world in which they live. We stand ready to lend support to our wounded friends by involving them with an established, united organization. We work in conjunction with local and state officials who are already in place to protect children. We desire to send a clear message to all involved with the abused child that this child is part of our organization, and that we are prepared to lend our physical and emotional support to them by affiliation and our physical presence. We stand at the ready to shield these children from further abuse. We do not condone the use of violence or physical force in any manner. However, if circumstances arise such that we are the only obstacle preventing a child from further abuse, we stand ready to be that obstacle. BACA was founded in 1995 in Provo, Utah, by a licensed clinical social worker. He was also a licensed play therapist, a registered play therapist. And the BACA Nation exists today as it was started with the simple idea. It was started as a test to see if bikers could make a difference in one abused child's life. The children needed something fast, something responsive, and something that was different, something that would bring bikers together. Our founder grew up with bikers in his life, and it was a positive experience. So he decided to gather some of his friends together and see if they could make a difference. So in 1995, BACA was born. Since then, we have seen exponential growth over the last 20 plus years. And we have grown tremendously, and we have not stopped growing. And we are going to be around as long as children need us. And it's very unfortunate, but that's going to be for a very long time. In North America, we have chapters in almost every state and province within North America. BACA began in Utah. It was followed up with Oklahoma, Missouri, Pennsylvania, and it just kept growing exponentially from there. We've seen growth through Europe. It started in Italy and has expanded through numerous countries within Europe. And finally in the area, finally in the area that we call Oceania, through our organization, and we have multiple chapters in Australia and also in New Zealand now as well. Why is this important? It's important to us because it means that no matter where a child goes, if a child is part of Bikers Against Child Abuse, if they're part of our organization, wherever they go, the Brotherhood of Bikers Against Child Abuse is international. It extends worldwide. So wherever they are, they have family that is there. We are all committed volunteers. Every single one of us is a committed volunteer. That means that BACA has no paid employees. Our membership willingly and freely gives of themselves, and we volunteer all of our time. There's thorough background checks that it takes to become a member of Bikers Against Child Abuse. Those background checks are done through the RCMP and include vulnerable sector. We do not obviously allow anyone to be a part of BACA that has any type of criminal background in domestic or child abuse. Once a supporter has once a new person has come around and they have been background checked and they have got to know us, they would become a supporter. While they're in the supporter phase of the organization, that takes minimum of 1 year to go through the supporter phase. They are given a sponsor, they have to ride with us, and they have to go through training, which consists of over 40 different webinars and training programs that they have to finish. After that first year is up, and if they have completed all of their training, they can be brought before the executive board of the chapter, where they can be voted in as a what we will call a patch member. So they would receive a member patch. One of the most important parts of being a member of the chapter is that you can be a primary to a child. That means that you are available to a child 24/7, 365. This just shows the brotherhood of who we are. This patch that you can see says, "I show up." One of the most important things that we do with an abused child is we make promises to them. We make promises that we're going to be there for them. We make promises that we're going to be at their house at a certain time to meet them. When we do a level 1, which I'll explain to you in a few minutes, anything that we do, we make promises to these children. And so many times abused children have been let down by possibly by their parents, by their family, by the community at large. They haven't been able to be children, which is something that many of us have had the privilege of being. And so many people that we meet tell us that they wish that this organization existed when they were children. So that little signature, that little sign there that says "I show up" is so important to what we do, because we make promises to those kids and we will not break those promises once we've made them to that child. What we are not, this is a very important part of this program, is explaining what we are not. We are not a vigilante organization. We do not have anything to do with perpetrators. We don't want to know who they are. We don't need to know who they are. And as I'll explain in a few minutes, we don't even know, in most cases, most people within the chapter really don't even know what's happened to that child. All we know is that this child has been abused in some form and that they are fearful. And that's all it takes for us to get involved. We're also not a great mentor program. What we are is a support to those children. We're not big brothers and big sisters. We have no political affiliation. We don't care about race, religion, color, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, any of that. And we have no borders. Who does BACA work with? We have a very narrow focused mission, and that mission is an abused child. We don't work with the extended family. We work in conjunction with the parents, but we don't work for the parents. We work for that child. We're there to empower that child, to allow them to have their childhood back, to let them know it's okay to go out of the house, because there's abused children that don't even want to leave their home. So we focus on the child, not the adults, and we focus to empower that child. How does it work? everything starts with an initial contact that's made to our organization. The different things that we have, which are going to be explained, are a level 1, a follow-up, a level 2, and court. So an initial contact comes from a referral. It can be from an organization. It can come from Child Protective Services. It can come directly from a family member. If there's a referral that's given to us, it's given to our child liaison, who is Scully. She's also on this Teams meeting and will be able to answer questions as well at the end. She will sit down or talk to that family on the phone. She will speak to them and verify all the information. We need to verify that there is that this is a legitimate case of abuse, that it has been reported. And then once that has been satisfied and the child liaison is confident with this family and this contact, she will bring the information to the executive board. The executive board will vote to start the initial visit, which is the next phase. At the sorry, I'm going to back up here again. At the initial visit, we'll have the child liaison and some of the members of the chapter. And at that time, we will look at security around the home, and we will have a chance to meet with the family. And again, when it comes to speaking about things that have happened to that child, the only person that ever hears that information is the child liaison. The child liaison does not share any of that information with anyone else within the chapter.
Ian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that you're at your time limit, so if you could wrap up in the next, like, 3 minutes?
Oh, yeah, I can. Yeah, I can for sure. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay.
So when we do a level 1, it's when we bring a child into our family. So we ride to the child's house as a chapter, and also the other chapters around us come as well. They are assigned primaries to 2 chapter members that are going to be their primary contact, and they are available 24/7, 365. During follow-up visits, these are scheduled visits with the child, and we go and we visit them on a regular basis, and that takes place either at a home or at a neutral location at the preference of the family if that's important to them. A level 2 is if there is a direct threat. If there's a direct threat against that child's safety, we will encamp around that family home 24/7 until that fear is removed from the child. It shows our commitment. We are committed to these children and their empowerment and their safety. The last thing we do, and one of the most important things, is we go to court with them. Often when abused children go to court, they're separated from their parents because their parents also have to testify. So they feel very isolated and confused. They feel very alone. Where we will sit with that child, we will be able to be with them. We'll be able to be with them while they are testifying, so they can focus on us instead of focusing on a perpetrator if they're there. It is always a win for a child when they're at court. We can't control the courts and the outcome, but for them to be able to get up and share their story and tell the court what happened is a win. And that is how BACA works. I'm not going to go through the clinical advisors and the research. I will send this information, but in lieu of time, and I want to make sure that if there's any questions that we can be able to answer those for you. So I will stop there. And as I said, I will send the presentation. Actually, I think someone already has a copy of the presentation. You guys already have that, right, Charlene?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so yeah, you can read the statistics, and on bacaworld.org, our international website, there's a lot of information that has had clinical studies done that have also been published through medical journals about the success of Bikers Against Child Abuse and what we do in working with abused children.
Thank you for your presentation this evening. And I appreciate that you sent us this information so that we can then, having it in the agenda allows us to provide it to staff should they see a need for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Do trustees have any questions? I don't see any questions for you this evening, Ian, so just
Okay.
with that, timing in mind and everything, sorry for the late start, thank you for being.
That's okay.
And
All right.
we appreciate your time this evening as well.
Great. Thank you very much for allowing us to present. And if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time to us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that has us moving on to the agenda. Yeah, is there a second? Oh. Can you hear me, Greg?
You are back now. I missed the first 20 seconds there though, sorry.
Okay. So I will call the motion for board chair response on 11.1. Is there anyone opposed? With no one opposed, the motion carries unanimously. 11.2, letter from D. Simpson, that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the above correspondence to the board chair for response. Is there a mover? Jessica, and a second? Elaine? Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? If no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to committee reports. 12.1, Business Committee. Invite Greg.
Thank you. So we do have one motion on the agenda from the Business Committee this evening, and perhaps I can read it and see if we get a seconder. It reads as follows, that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, write a letter to the Ministry of Education and Childcare and the Ministry of Finance regarding the capital and operating fund requirements of the school district.
Thank you. It's been seconded by Tanya. Greg, did you want to open discussion?
Actually, Chair, if you don't mind, I'd give you the opportunity first since it's your motion, and otherwise I can.
You know what, I'll let you go with it tonight because your mic's probably gonna work better than mine.
Okay, no problem. So the board had a good discussion in the business committee meeting about writing a letter about some of the challenges that have recently come up with respect to our funding, and this is in response to that, is to write a letter to the ministry and do a little bit of advocacy work on this respect. So that's about all I have to say at this point, Chair, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Okay, not seeing anybody, so I'll call the question on the motion. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We don't have anything from the Education Committee this evening, so we're going to senior staff reports. Mark Walsh on the Long Range Facilities Plan progress and update.
Good evening, Chair and trustees. And I'm just waiting for the live to come on me here. It'll happen in a moment. So good evening. The first item this evening is just a brief update on our long range facilities plan. I know that, we have FESL report to talk about how the district is doing in its core functioning. But this evening we want to make sure that we're giving the board and the public updates as we proceed with the long range facilities plan. And so the board passed it about a year ago. And really, now I will say some of these things were already in motion at the time of the passage of the long range facilities plan. but there's been a lot of progress on the plan. So just want to briefly ask Karen if she could bring up the presentation, and I'll be brief. So if you can go to page, the second page, please, Karen. So you'll see we've taken the traditional red, yellow, green kind of monitoring system of how we're doing and expanded it a little bit. And so red light clearly or is suggesting we haven't actually progressed in an area and that we need to do some work. Yield is suggesting that we're not ready to potentially recommend a proposal coming off the table or a recommendation coming off the table, but we really aren't prioritizing it as a district. Yellow means we've got to start, but we need to keep going. Green is the good news, is we're actively implementing. U-turn, something maybe a little bit new, is where we're suggesting that the board may want to have a look at potentially revamping or revising or removing a particular recommendation for future years. And then finally is the arrival, which if you scroll down just a little bit, Karen, we just chose the blue as just a little bit distinct from the rest of the colors. So I won't go through it all, but I do want to overall state that the board is largely green. We are achieving and moving forward on a number of things. You think of the North End consultation to address capacity. Ladysmith consultation will be coming to the board hopefully very soon. We've talked about a school site acquisition charge. That's done. We've arrived. And so some various aspects that are addressed in the plan for the board to contemplate. The one that I will point out, and we're not suggesting that the board take action on this because it's more appropriate to come to committee to have our opportunity for stakeholders to have a say as well. And that's on page 74 of 101. Karen, if you could go down to that. Well, that's fine. So it's just about the land recommendations that we've had. So two of them were discussing potential dispositions of medium and small parcels. And I think this might be a little bit of an I told you so from some of the trustees around the table. I know humble enough that that's not going to happen. But what we realized is that we have some recommendations that really are going to be so site and issue specific with respect to disposition that it created a bit of confusion. So here we are out in the community talking about how we need more land for schools. Then we've got a couple of proposals that says, well, maybe we should dispose some land. It still may well happen if there's a need or the opportunity. When you think about ND as an example, the board's likely going to have a capital cost contribution. Maybe we would look at something like that. But given our need to acquire land is so much greater than the minute little parcels that we might want to contemplate disposing of at some point, we're thinking the board might want to rethink and remove recommendation 27 and 28. And then just finally, turning over to questions, I do want to highlight a couple of policies. And so here was suggestions to create policies to guide some of our work and a committee to guide our work, and both of those are done. So overall, very successful inaugural year of the Long Range Facilities Plan. And I think, and we certainly hope, that the board and the community are seeing direct ties to the decision making and recommendations of staff and the board to the Long Range Facilities Plan. So a number of people not here this evening doing so much work in our facilities and finance department, helping with this as well. And of course, the Long Range Facilities Plan committee, who spent the last year doing a lot of learning, I think, to be able to provide feedback. But I've been very excited to see the work and very proud to show you this evening.
Are there any questions for Mark? You guys have one so far, Greg?
Yeah, thank you, and through the chair. So I just wanted to share my gratitude to staff and trustees and the Long Range Facilities Committee and the community and our partners for working on implementation of the long-range facilities plan. And just to share with you how pleased I am to see that their progress being reported back to the board and seeing how we're able to start checking off some of these things. So just my hat's off just to everyone involved. So thank you.
Thank you. Jessica?
Hi. I'm not sure if you can hear me or see me. Oh yeah, okay, good. Sorry, this is also strange. A question about the well, potential recommended changes for the long range facilities plan. You know, I would be happy to recommend moving those items, but I'm wondering two things. One, what is the proposed process for changing the long range facilities plan? Including, are you contemplating adding any items?
Sure. So through the chair. So with respect, we've gone through this kind of update with the Long Range Facilities Plan Committee, and there seemed to be consensus about where we're at on these, as well as the potential for removal. What we have not done is contemplating additional items. And so what I would think is that we would come back to the Long Range Facilities Committee in probably September and say, ask that question as well, and then come to board committee to say, okay, Long Range Facilities Plan Committee, the board saw our update. There's a couple of recommendations, and then we go from there. And then if the board had any significant additions, I would suggest that there's probably a consultation process involved. I mean, it's a pretty fresh plan, so perhaps minor additions. So I would see September to the Long Range Facilities Plan, and then potentially right to Business Committee if the timing aligns.
I was just going to say how much I appreciate not only having this update and report, but just how user friendly it is and how easy it is to read and understand. I think that will really help the community. Will make it much more, people feel much more involved and have a better understanding of what we're doing. So good work.
Any other questions? All right. So that concludes 13.1 of the long range facilities plan. Takes us to 13.2. Mark, I'll give you an opportunity to open and then.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And just before I start, I did fail to recognize the amazing work of our communications team in creating that document, which I think is obvious to all onlookers who actually created the document. So again, thank you for continuing with the high quality work product that we always expect from our communications team. So before you is the recommended motion by law with respect to the preliminary budget. So we've had a variety of opportunities to see the document, to understand how the document was built, what are the assumptions in the document, etc. Now you are seeing the technical document that would be provided to the Ministry of Education upon the third reading by the board. Just a quick reminder of a couple of the assumptions that are happening in this particular budget. So again, we are not quite unique, but in a minority in the province of seeing ourselves in a position of being able to not only balance the budget, but offer a little bit of reinvestment into the system. With a fairly important caveat that we have not included significant transfers to local capital for technology particularly, and that's because we do anticipate a year-end surplus that in September we would come to the board to recommend use to replenish our technology funds where they're required. And so the reason you're not seeing us recommend the transfer now is because if we did recommend the transfer now, then given that we anticipate a surplus, then we'd either be theoretically cutting out something or alternatively not being able to reinvest in staff for September for that reinvestment. And so just as a background for the rationale for that. So we've got the budget calendar. We've had a variety of sessions. We've heard from stakeholders, and we've had the opportunity to meet with students as well, and very, very positive sessions that you're going to, I think, see the outcome in a variety of different capital programs in the budget and the education committee for some time to come, given the concerns that we've heard. You'll see the assumptions include an increase in enrollment, domestic enrollment, and so I will say we budgeted conservatively, but that's quite a good thing because we're actually seeing a little bit softer enrollment at the elementary school level. Secondary seems to be right on, or even a little bit increased in the case of ND. International students, that enrollment significantly up, and so we're still budgeting, or I should say we're budgeting a much more optimistic number, and our demand is such that we would actually exceed that number, but there are a couple of issues at play. One is ND is full, and the second is with respect to homestays. We're having a bit of a difficult time getting enough to support the demand, and so we're going to be right on, a little bit above probably our budgeted number, but it could be more if we needed. We have not put in anticipated teacher and CUPE increases into this budget because we assume that when the bargaining is done and the increases are going to happen, the ministry will provide us that funding. And it's I believe, a reasonable approach that districts around the province are taking. We've included some small inflationary measures. We've included recognition that exempt staff and principals are likely to get increases, and so that's been included in the budget. We've recognized that significantly higher continuing staff absentee costs, so that's in there. But we also, of course, the Employment Standards Act changes that give 5 days to all employees once they've been with us for a certain amount of time is going to be a very significant hit to the district that was unanticipated. So that does eat up some money. We'll say, I just don't want to, we've budgeted approximately $675,000. We've been having debates internally. We've been talking to colleagues around the province on what they're looking at. I will say I think that the number we've picked is probably a little higher than the number actually will be, but given this is our first year of experience, we want to make sure that we're as risk averse as possible. As enrollment increases, or as enrollment shows up, if we do come in above our relatively conservative numbers, money will come with those kids. We will be able to provide the supports and staffing and ratios, etc., that go with them. And then additionally, I think that's been, the board has had quite a vigorous discussion in the last couple of meetings, a relatively small increase to create a tier 3 oriented program, creating some staffing that will support some of our most needy kids to connect back to the district. And again, you can see the reconnect and recover theme that we are focusing on, because we do think the budget is going to serve well in that regard. We have proposed a very small use of surplus as well for the purposes of continued outreach program in summer. Remember that connects our kids back to schools, and was very, very highly regarded. And then I wanted to note too that the budget does bring our custodial services back to the levels that they were pre-pandemic. We are right now doing some exploration about what that looks like, what it would cost to continue to have spraying, how often, a lot of those questions, and that we're very confident that if we feel that we have an additional need, that we'll be able to look at surplus to do so. At this point, however, we have not included it in the budget because, again, we'd be looking at cutting programs for what are really likely to be one-time expenditures. We are continuing increased ventilation, so that's going to have ongoing electricity and filtration costs to the district, not quite at the level that they were this year. So, and then finally, just again, the technology transfer is not there. We will recommend that in September. So you know, this district, this board has achieved unprecedented levels of student success, particularly with respect to graduation. It's only been increasing to all segments of our population that we track. And so, you know, we didn't look at major shifts and changes because you know, there's a lot of things that are working, and of course we have some challenges that I think the investments were intended to drive. Finally, you will see the recommended motion, and so you'll see our district with a budget of $182 million approximately, and really that's about $170 million of operating special purpose funds, and then $10 million of deferred capital, etc. So very, very happy to present this budget, particularly in the current climate across the province, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. So at this point, I'll open it up for discussion and questions for trustees. Our speakers list.
Any questions on the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Stephanie?
Thanks, Mark. My question is actually for learning services folks. It's not a numbers question. Is that okay that I ask a question like that? Okay.
Yes, it is.
So, I just need some more information on this hub model that's being proposed. And I'm wondering if someone from Learning Services can help me out with this. Specifically, what I'm looking for is, so in all my time in schools, one of the things, like I haven't heard parents ask me for their kids to have more time out of school. I haven't had any teachers telling me they want more time for kids out of school, and I haven't had any principals telling me they want kids out of school more. And I don't think that's exactly what this model is proposing. I think my understanding is what you're talking about is a set of supports for students who aren't currently actually in schools. But what I'm wondering is, when I'm in schools and when I'm hearing from parents who are in distress because their kids aren't in school full time, because we're calling them and asking their parents to pick them up, how can we meet those needs? How are we meeting those needs? How does this particular model help us meet those students as well and those families?
Through the chair, did you want me to jump in, Laura, or did you want to? Yeah, okay, so through the chair. So this is a really super important question, and I appreciate the need to be very, very thoughtful whenever we are proposing something that is highly individualized and perhaps even off-site for kids. It's meeting needs in a few ways. One is that one of the reasons that we have it's not a large population of students, but there is a population of students whose parents are getting phoned regularly, who are really struggling to manage in the school setting, who do have a need for really intentional intervention that looks a little bit more therapeutic and a little bit less like a kind of typical classroom program because their needs are so highly individualized. What we're wanting to do with this program is provide an opportunity for kids to have access to some interventions that are very difficult to deliver in a school environment when their needs are, sometimes that environment is the stressor, the very world of busy hallways and bright lights and 300 people walking around and transitions and all of that stuff is really, really taxing for some of our kiddos. And so our hope is that this program, it's not a program of choice. It's not a directed placement. It's not a different place to go to school. It's a setting that will provide time limited intervention that can be very, very targeted and individualized. It's also the hope is to connect it to outreach. Some of our kiddos being in a bricks and mortar setting all day is too big, but we know if they had some of the day in that kind of environment and some of the day where they had access to small group settings or individualized opportunities out in the community, you know, those kinds of things, they would really have an opportunity to grow some skills and capacity that would allow us to continue to grow their time and their experience in their school settings. We also are aware that some of our kiddos that have really, really complex needs have needs that are highly visible in a school setting. We have classrooms that were evacuated 7 times last week because somebody was struggling with managing themselves in that environment. And even though we had incredibly intentional plans and all kinds of capacity building and support in place for the adults who are serving the children in that room. The reality is that environment is too big for that child to manage right now. And even when the whole plan is followed perfectly, we still are having room clears. So now we are also impacting the learning of everybody else who is in that learning environment. And we are impacting the time of all of the specialist people in that building who, you know, maybe were attached to that child in that moment, but maybe we're attached to other children and other programs and other supports, and we're pulling them in because of this very complex situation. So this is a support for some very complex kids, and it's not being considered lightly. It's not, I mean, every single day we're going to ask the question about, is this the most inclusive opportunity for these children, and who needs to be where for what when, because it's all very individualized stuff. But I do think that sometimes having access to a separate setting that's really calm and really highly intentional and structured gives us a chance to practice some strategies and build some capacity and stamina that can then be transferred back to the school setting. And we do see an ebb and flow of, you know, some of the kiddos who participate, it'll be for very time limited time, and they may even bring somebody from school with them to practice and get some coaching in that setting and then go back. Like, it's, I can't even tell you what it's going to look like for every child, because everybody who participates is going to do something slightly different based on their individual needs. But we're looking for a place to have some flexibility that we don't currently have any. This is one more thing in our toolkit of opportunities for our most complex kids, so we can do what we can to give them some opportunities that are richer and more sustaining than what some of them are experiencing currently.
And if I could add, please, through the chair. I can't see the chair, but. I can't hear anything, sorry. Okay. And so if I could, just adding to Director Steele's comments, is just kind of zoom out a little bit as well and really consider the district as a whole. When we think about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 needs, Carrie's talking really about this sort of echelon of top tier 3 needs and interventions that are quite significant in nature. And what that will do is that will help, I think, take a little pressure off the student themselves, so that they can maybe exist in an environment where they can be successful. It's going to let a little steam and pressure out for the school, generally the staff, etc. And I also want to emphasize that we have a large focus on tier 1 inclusive practices. This is not, tier 3 considerations are certainly not in isolation in any way, shape, or form. And by looking at tiers 1, 2, and 3, we can look at the needs of all the students. We can look at the needs of students that might have some tier 2 needs and some tier 3 needs, or some more significant tier 3 needs. So I just want to make sure that we're having this conversation with that context of kind of zooming out, and that we're looking at providing support to the system. And we have been providing support to the system coming up through tier 1, but also with at the tier 3 level as well. So this isn't an isolation in any way.
I just want to seek some clarity, because at first I sort of understood this to be about a particular group of kids who aren't currently being served, and might not be in school. But then you were talking about, you know, kids who, like this example from last week, who, you know, maybe whatever is happening in the school, or maybe there are current, like whatever events that are culminating to create crisis. That is causing, to your point, you know, a lot of folks to spend a lot of time, and also including those students who are impacted when you talk about clearing classrooms 7 times. So this is a place also that, with supports from the district, students could go to, students like this student, or students like that could go to as well.
Possibly. I think our goal is to start small, right? Like, we want to make sure that we build something we can sustain, and that everybody who's involved in it really understands the goals and the appropriate kinds of interventions and supports to offer. So I think initially our focus would be on the children who are out of school, because we need those kids to come back to us. We need to provide opportunities that are meeting their needs and helping them move forward. But I think there is the potential for lots of kids to benefit from the supports that are offered. But, you know, I think when we first presented this notion, we talked about phasing it in, that we had a beginning place that we wanted to have now, and then there's some layers we'd like to add over time. So I think we just have to be really incremental as we move forward and make sure that we want to serve the most vulnerable kids through this program. So we have to be really thoughtful about capacity and spaces and who can be served. So it would start with children that are either fully on outreach, or with children that are bridging between outreach and school settings. And then I do think there's the potential to support some of these other learners as well who are really, really struggling where they're at right now.
Right, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. So on the topic of support, I'm not sure who to direct this question through the chair to staff. We've heard throughout the year a lot about the need and importance of our EAs to support students in the classroom. And I was hoping to see something in this budget to increase the presence of EAs in our system. And I'm hoping that somebody could help me understand a little bit when we look at Schedule 2B of the draft. As I read it, the 2022 amended annual budget, there's a difference between that and the proposed budget. And I was hoping somebody could explain that to me and so that I have a full understanding. It appears on paper that it's a reduction, but it probably isn't.
Sure. So through you, Madam Chair. So on a year-to-year basis, what we do as a district is we are counting up the number of, particularly with supports for kids with diverse needs, we are counting up the number of kids that have level 1, level 2, level 3 designations. And then that is not the sole fund that's going to support those kids. But where we are anticipating a decline, or alternatively where we don't actually have the kids, what we would say in-house, then what happens is the funding does get pulled back. So we're budgeting for a smaller number of kids with diverse needs. This is a yearly occurrence, and so when the kids show up in September, funds are going to support, funds come in to support those kids. But this is a regular process where EAs are going to go down, and then EAs will come back as the year goes on to support the kids that you get. You will see this dynamic in almost every single year that we budget, barring a major year where we already can the kids are already designated and the number is really, really, really high. But, Carrie and her team, they know every kid in the system that currently exists. We'll get some kids flowing in. We might get some Ks. Might get some more kids designated, but at this time they're not. So that's the dynamic of the EA shift.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, please. Thank you for that answer. So based on my rough math this year, it's a decrease of about 300,000. What does it take to increase the hours that our EAs can be made available or can be provided to our EAs? Do we need a motion? Do we need, how would that process look through this budget?
So through you, Madam Chair, hours are completely different than just EA funds for EA. So if, for instance, if the board said, you know what, we don't want this program in the school district anymore, the coal mining program, not a coal mining program, but I don't want to point out any existing program. And there's $500,000 that we could reallocate. And we said, we want to do it for EAs. Then what would happen is we would send it to learning services to be able to support the kids. The way we currently function is that we would be supporting kids while they are there. So I think that we had a bit of this conversation before where, it's that time from bell to bell. We often try to find other jobs that could match. So crossing guard, supervision, etc. If the board was wanted to go a different direction and just straight up add hours, that wouldn't add EAs because the price for an hour, I'll delay a little bit because we had been doing a little bit of that work, is enormous. Like to add 5 hours to every EA in the school district would be, I'll get that number, but it's in the hundreds of thousands. So it's a very big number.
Should I add myself back to the list or do you allow one quick follow-up?
Let's do one quick follow-up so that we can.
Thank you. So assuming that coal mining program had 500,000 and the board decided that its priority was to fund EAs. Is there enough EAs available to fund an increase?
Well, we would be putting ourselves in the position, unfortunately, that we actually got put in this year. Like we did put, we added supports throughout the year, and unfortunately, we've created ourselves more failures to fill. So, I mean, certainly, I think that the issue is not filling jobs. The issue is filling absences of the people in the jobs. So could we get enough EAs to fill the additional positions created by an investment? Carrie might correct me if I'm wrong. I think the answer is yes. But what we do is we ultimately create every EA you add is one less person that's going to be available to replace the absent person. So hence why we went and added the RA position as a kind of backstop emergency role, because we're having trouble as the system as it's been a multi-year process. So additional EAs like to the tune of $500,000 would create quite a strain on our ability to provide the services on a continuity basis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Department of Learning Services. With the summer outreach program, do we have, I just want to be reminded, and forgive me because I should remember, do we have any educational components to that program in terms of reading or math or literacy specifically?
Go ahead.
So through the chair. So last year we did offer some academic pieces at the Woodland site. And we found that the kids didn't avail themselves of it. It wasn't something that in their summer holidays we could actually engage them in. It was really, really difficult. In elementary, we didn't, because we were bridging to food security and supports in the community around mental health and wellness and things like that, helping kids rebuild connections with one another and bridge back to the schools. Children are used to playing in the summertime, and we just didn't find that when opportunities for things that felt more like learning activities were provided, they came. They weren't there for them. So we are looking at focusing on the supports that really engage the families and kids last year. And we did see, and I see Mr. Balcomb's on, he'll be able to speak to the secondary piece much more than I can, but we did see with the elementary that the kids who came to play in the summer and came to make friends and practice their English also came back to school in September, and it was a really successful transition back to school, which really, they gained ground quickly once they felt safe and comfy back in their classrooms.
Don, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I'll just add that at the secondary level, last year we found that students from Learning Alternatives made connections with the teachers that we had at Learning Alternatives and engaged in some academic work. Students from our other secondary schools that participated in outreach came and engaged for the social emotional connections, the opportunity to engage in some activities. So we're going to continue with that aspect, and we're going to reduce the amount of teacher time that we have connected with that program, knowing that it's going to be the academic connection with our Learning Alternative students who have ongoing work that will run through the summer. We found that our other students, even though schools provided academic opportunities for them to engage in work, the students from the other schools were more inclined to just come for the activities and then pick up their academics in September when they returned. So that's our plan for this summer.
Okay. That's fair. May I have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
I certainly respect that, and I hear you, and I certainly wouldn't suggest you change anything for this summer. I would say that I know from personal experience, having done week-long reading and math fun camps at various elementary schools in the summer, there is a way of doing it, making it fun, and I know learners who did benefit from them. And the math camp, we were playing dominoes. The reading camp, we were doing art activities with stories and storytelling. It wasn't hard academics, but I guess I would like to see more connections with the community around those kind of fun activities, but that also have a way of making learning fun and keeping those components. So it's just something to think about at this point.
Jessica?
Hi. So through the Sheriff to Learning Services, I want to share my question, which is really my struggle in considering this budget and the Tier 3 model consideration for Tier 3 program. So what, it fundamentally when it comes back to me, and what I want to know is, why is it that you chose this suggestion? What I'm saying is that, like, when we hear from schools that are struggling, we hear from parents who's got their, IEPs are not being followed, or their student safety plans are not able to be fulfilled. And then when I watched the partner group presentations, when they talked about staff morale and burnout, and that their asks were for additional staff directly in the schools, increased counselor time, increased inclusion support workers. And so what my question is, why is it that you thought that, the proposed Tier 3 model or program offers the biggest bang for the buck when it just feels like everybody's, kind of struggling right now? And my gut would be to just kind of, add in some support directly into the schools because of, we're all struggling right now. So I'm curious about why you thought that this suggestion was the biggest bang for the buck.
I'll start, Carrie. Is that fine? And then you can sort of follow up. And I think if we're thinking about the amount of money that we're considering for this coming year, if we were to spread that across 35 schools and it maybe equaled out to some FTE, it probably would be a small amount of FTE. And when we think about some of the issues that you've just mentioned, staff are beautiful and talented and skilled, and they are working and doing great things and addressing lots and lots and lots of those issues, those Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 issues. Giving a school another person for a day or a day and a half a week, could have some impact. Everyone's going to try their best to do their utmost for sure, but that small amount of FTE, even if it was a larger amount of FTE, I'm not sure would have the impact that we're hoping for. Again, we're looking at a smallish amount of dollars. We're looking at about 300,000 or so. And so when we think about spreading that across 35 schools, I'm not sure if it would have the impact. Now, it wasn't something, so what we did is we've had over a number of years, particularly exacerbated by the pandemic, where we have collected data, anecdotal data, qualitative data, quantitative data around some of these particular cases. And these children are not being served in our school district, and they are the most extreme needs. That's where our thinking and some of our decision making came from. These are our children that are experiencing the most challenging, complex situations, and we are unable to serve their needs in a way that allows them to feel that they're in a place that they belong, that their needs are being met in a dignified way. We don't have the ability to do that. It's a horrible choice for us to say, are we going to help these guys, or, as you say, get a bigger bang for our buck and attempt to try to make sure that an IEP is being followed in another school? These are very difficult decisions. We want to make sure that we meet the needs of everyone. But in our estimation, these are the most extreme needs that are not being met.
And if I can just add on a little piece to that too, I think, to me, it's a question of equity for these students who are very, very complex and whose needs are not being met. But I also think that it supports some of the other things that you're talking about, because I think, when these very complex children are supported and they are having success, it creates space for the other people in the school who are providing support to be in the places with many other children doing some of the other Tier 1 and 2 work that is so critical. And we know that classroom environments and the work that we do at Tier 1 has an immense impact on the success of all of the learners in that room. And we need to create a continuum of supports so that people that are working with the children in classrooms every day and providing that, frontline instruction and programming are able to continue that in a really meaningful, fulsome way without being diverted to other things all the time. So it does two pieces. It supports the kids with these really intentional needs that we have no other option for right now. We cannot wrap around them the way that we would like to wrap around them, and this will allow us to do that work differently. And it also frees up people to spend time doing other ways and places of support in the school. So really all of our children will benefit from this. So when I listen to the pieces in your question about biggest bang for the buck and the, support teacher work and the counselor work and all of the other pieces, like it actually does support all of that because it's a structure that provides for some of our kids whose learning needs are highly visible in a school setting. It's if some of the children we're talking about, if they have a really difficult day, the whole place has a really difficult day. And if we're meeting their needs, they are having success, they're growing. I think that question of dignity that Laura mentioned is actually really, really key. Like it's really hard to watch a little person struggle all day, every day, and know that there might be something that we as adults could be doing differently if we created an environment or an opportunity that developmentally was a better fit. And so I think this idea of building capacity and stamina and working towards that full inclusion with their peers, it's not something everybody can do for 5 hours a day right out of the gate. And so I do really, we've talked about this for 3 years. Like this wasn't kind of a quick decision. This is something we've been reflecting on for a really long time. And I do believe that whole continuum tier 1 to 3 is well supported with the introduction of this additional support.
I may go back on.
Naomi. Speak loudly.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have a couple of questions and a comment, because I too, I'm having a hard time with this. Thought about it a lot because I've always been an advocate of all students and their diverse needs. And now we're in a difficult position because I hear all the stakeholders telling me their stories. I've been to schools to visit. I've talked to teachers, I've talked to EAs, and I'm hearing at the ground level what they're experiencing. So it's really hard for me to conceptualize creating a whole new program. And we're talking about, the EA support. I do believe we need to increase our EA support. I've been saying that when I was running my campaign. I also know directly the importance of increasing our counseling time for students. Mental health is huge. I guess for me, it's like, I think Superintendent Tate made a comment about how it may amount to just a small amount of FTE. But having been an educator, that small amount of FTE means a lot when it comes into your classroom or into your school. You do feel the impact of even a small amount of FTE. I guess for me, it's like I looked through the budget and I was trying to get an actual, what is this actually going to cost? I'm also looking at, it's the increase in administration as well. Like I'm looking at all these pieces and I'm wondering, like, what is this actually going to cost to have this tier 3 hub program?
Mark, I believe I have a number off the top of my head, but I don't want to be wrong.
Yes, through Madam Chair, I believe it is 316,000. But I'm going to just delay for 2 seconds to let Ms. Sutton come on and tell me if I've added to that number.
That's correct.
316,540.
Thank you. Excuse me being a new trustee, reading these documents. That's a little challenging.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I do. I think the bigger issue for us right now as a district is trying to figure out what is the reason we're not being able to fill the absences for EAs in the school district. What is going on that's that's creating this and how can we fix it? And I know Greg mentioned, increasing the hours, and then Mark explained how that all works and everything, but I think we really need to sit at the table and really figure this one out. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in terms of the EA piece, I think it's important context to know that this isn't a Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools issue with recruitment and retention. It's not even actually just EAs, it's across the whole, the whole QP realm. But the EA piece is particularly challenging across the province right now. I was part of a group with BC Case this year. We did a bit of a focus group thing, and we have lost a lot of EAs to health over the last couple of years with pandemic. When the single site order came in, people who used to work a little bit at school and a little bit in group homes or worked in a couple of healthcare settings now can get a full-time job in one place. So that definitely impacted things. I think schools have been really complex places to work the last couple of years as well. But when we literally, and I mean, Kristen may want to speak to this a little bit more, we are interviewing EAs on a weekly basis. We are capturing every qualified candidate that we can find. So are our neighboring districts, and we regularly steal people from each other depending on who's living where and is driving on the highway which day. It is really challenging, but I also just feel the need to say, when I don't want to detract from the beautiful work that EAs do in classrooms. They do a lot of really amazing things for a lot of really complex kiddos. They work really, really hard. But some of our children also have really, really complex needs and are very complex medically. They're complex developmentally, physically. There's a lot of things going on for them. And I do think that our most complex children deserve access to our specialist staff. I do believe that what a fully trained inclusion support teacher or counselor or speech and language pathologist can bring to the table is different from what an EA can offer. And some of our children require a greater level of expertise and professional training to be able to have their needs met. I also think that having 7 adults in a classroom is not the same as having children building a relationship with their teachers. So even if we had an unlimited supply of human resources and dollars to support that human resource, I don't believe that an unlimited number of adults in the building is actually our way forward for the kiddos to have success. I believe that EA support is critical when it's provided in the ways and places that it most benefits our kids, but there are many other interventions that are really, really important too. And so this program is designed to enhance those opportunities for the tier 3 of our tier 3 students. That's what we're really trying to do. It will also free up time for EAs to do different work in the work in classrooms that we need them to be doing all the time. Many of our EAs are working one-on-one, but 2-on-1 sometimes, 3-on-1 sometimes, right? And so we need them to be available to provide the support to the kids that's within their training and expertise and really make a difference every day at school. And that's really difficult for some of our school teams right now.
Thank you.
If I may just add to that through the chair as well. I think the piece that Carrie alluded to there is that the beautiful work that our EAs do really is very often in accordance with a plan that's developed lots of times by our inclusion support coordinators, our psychologists, our speech and language pathologists, and other educators with specialty in particularly some of those areas of neurodiversity that those students may present with. And I think that's a really important piece to recognize as well, is that is a tremendous support to the work that EAs can do as well. So I would just add that as another piece to consider.
Thank you. So I'm the next speaker on the list. I find myself really struggling right now with a couple of different things, I guess. The first one is the conversation regarding educational assistance. There's nobody on the board that would disagree with the idea that more people in buildings is good for kids, for sure. We all agree on that. What I'm struggling with, though, is our inability to actually fulfill the positions that we already have. And if we allocate other funds to increase that number of that particular category of employee, and then we can't fill it, it's money that's tied up that we can't use for something else. So I feel like I'm worried about that, because we've had so many failure to bills this year. It's very high. And so I understand where everybody's coming from in desiring more, because I find myself at budget time every single year wishing that I had more dollars so I could do all of the things. And that has never happened yet. So it's a struggle to sit here and try to juggle and figure out what do we do. The other piece that's really standing out to me is that over the course of the last 3 years, we have seen directly as a board the impacts of what happens when we are not able to support kids to get them back into classrooms at a pace that feels good for families. And I'm worried that if we bypass this opportunity, we might be bypassing the opportunity to address some of those things that we've seen. I am not an educator. I'm just here at the big heart trying to do a good job. But I'm worried that if I don't try something different, that I'm going to wind up not making a difference at all. And so I support this. I do, because I feel like it's the first time we've had the opportunity to do something a little bit different for some of the kids that we struggle the most to help. And I don't want to ignore that. And I don't have enough money to do anything. And so I'm struggling a bit with the idea that we can't give this a shot. We're one of the few districts in the province that actually have a little tiny sliver of money to spend. And what if we can use that little tiny sliver of money to help these kids come back to school faster, at their pace, of course, but sooner rather than later. I don't want kids out of school. And if this is something that will help them, I'm willing to try it. So it's just, those are my thoughts right now, because I feel like I always want to do so many things, but there's never enough money to do all the things. And I don't want to tie up money that I can't actually spend. Like, I can't actually spend money on EAs right now because there's not enough people to spend the money on. So how do I do that? It's not because I don't want to. It's because I don't think there's enough people. Anyways, I can wax philosophical longer than I want. Stephanie's next on the speakers list.
Thanks. I just want to make a comment on the EA conversation first, and I have to say this is my 8th time sitting in this process, and except for the very first budget that I went through as a trustee, which was horrible. It was the worst experience of my life as a trustee when we had to cut. I think it was 30% of our support staff and numerous teaching positions. It was horrible. But since then, every year we've been trying to tackle this EA issue. And I have to say, I want to echo what Carrie said earlier about the importance of EAs in our system and the important work that they do. And it feels though like every single year we're having this conversation, and every single year it's also about like we keep throwing stuff against the wall to see if we can like change the situation of a failure to fill. And and we become victims of ourselves by what we did last year, which was to add more positions. We add more positions, and then we don't have people to backfill positions. And now we have 5 more days, which is good. We need them, but now we're going to have 5 more days to fill. And so I feel like actually what we need to do is tackle this problem in a systematic, focused way, which is, we talked about this at the beginning of this process with CUPE, to do a labor market analysis on this situation and actually get to the bottom of it. Is it actually that people want more hours? Is it actually about pay? What is it actually about? And then let's solve the problem properly, because if we keep just kind of, I don't know, trying to plug individual holes, we're not going to solve the problem. So that's my comment on EAs. They are critical, important, integral parts of our system, but they are also working with some of our most complex students. And we need a better solution than what we're currently doing. But my question now, see how we did that, is actually about focused schools versus not focused schools. And I just want to get, while we're talking about all the money, I'm trying to figure out, we have a certain number of focus schools. At one point, we expanded the focus schools, then we retracted the focus schools. But the issues that exist and existed in those schools that we expanded to and then maybe contracted, what do we do to support schools that are struggling, but maybe don't meet the criteria that we have for focus schools? And is the budget, this little bit of money that we have, an opportunity to provide support in that way? And it's not, I know we're kind of, it feels like a Sophie's Choice right now, like, it's not a, we're in this like really bad position, but I'm just really exploring all of the possibilities that we hear about as trustees to really focus and make sure that this small amount of money that we are very fortunate in our district to have to spend is going to the right place. So my question is about how we support schools that aren't focus schools. Do we only staff based on ratios, or do we have room to say this school is struggling with this, or this school is struggling with this, so we're going to provide them extra support in whatever that may be?
Yes, through the chair. We do have the ability to start with a base sort of budget that for sure will be dependent on student FTE, and then that learning services then goes in and sort of personalizes or individualizes each school's resources based on needs. In regards to a school that might be struggling or a school that has issues, which is probably every single one of our schools, the approach will be very individualized depending on what the concern is or what the issue is. So yeah, I could give a million examples, but I guess I'll say that depending on the issue, depending on the school, we will support or resource them differently based on what they need to the best of our ability. So the focus schools won't necessarily be an answer to all concerns and all struggles. And I'll just share again for the group that focus schools at the moment, we have 6 of them. They have the good fortune of a literacy coordinator, a reading teacher, a 1.0 reading teacher at 4 of those 6 schools. The other 2 schools share a reading teacher. And 4 of the schools, the original focus schools, receive a 0.2 principal, vice principal FTE over and above what other schools receive. And they receive very similar social emotional support from learning services, just like every other school does. And when anything comes to the surface, learning services is responsive, a plan is put in place, and we support the school as necessary. But I'll pass it on to the team to add any other pieces to that.
Yeah, I might just sort of speak to how we review the data around some of those things too. And when I say data, I'm talking about qualitative stuff for sure. But, you know, we do get the base levels of staffing around IST time, counseling support, CYFSW support, ICSSW, admin time, all of those pieces. We have a day where we all go into the boardroom together, and I'm speaking about elementary right now, but we put all the elementary schools up and we chart what levels of staffing are there, what are other complexities we know about, both with the student population and with the staff. I mean, this year we've had a lot of leaves of absence for school psychologists, we've had PVP moving around, we've had inclusion support teachers going on leave. And so we try to capture a big picture of all of that stuff. And then, you know, when we look at how are we supporting the schools, if we have a little bit of extra counseling time or a little bit of extra IST time, we try to pick the place where we think that type of support and resource is the one that's needed, right? So school A might get a little bit extra of this because we know something about their school site, whereas this site we know something different is going on, so we support it a different way. If we know that a school is going to have a whole new admin team and a new psychologist and a new speech language pathologist, then we're not also going to change the counselor, right? Like all of those things in terms of FTE and who's assigned to different sites where we have that flexibility. It's like we take up every single square inch of whiteboard in the boardroom and kind of map it all out. And it's all of us in there together talking about what we know about the schools and the system and the needs of the kiddos in the buildings. And so we really do try to be as equitable and transparent with each other as possible so that we can make the best decisions on behalf of the system.
I think I abused my privileges earlier. Okay. Greg, or wait, Margaret came on. I think. Oh, Margaret.
Yeah, through Madam Chair, just the one thing to remind trustees about is just that in September too, we've mentioned that we do budget on a conservative basis from an enrollment perspective. And so when additional enrollment comes, of course, we have the classroom teacher that's going to be supporting that child, but there also does come additional resources to support. So for instance, this fall, we had a humongous influx above and beyond our budgeted amount of international students. And so there was more ELL supports that were able to not just support international students, but also support, other, domestic students as well. So that does happen in fall. That's kind of one of the benefits of, I guess you'd say, a little bit more of the conservative enrollment perspective. Not only does it save you from risk in case you miss, but if you do, and we typically do come above that, we do have a little bit of flexibility to support emergent needs, where if we put everything and assume that we're going to get 200 kids more than we do, and we only get the exact number of kids, well, maybe we've now assigned staffing a little far in advance that's not actually targeted to where we could be supporting kids in the best way. So there is more flexibility than just what we're seeing in this budget in a typical year at the very least.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So I just wanted to say that, when it comes to Tier 3 program that's proposed, I think it's important that we support our most vulnerable students to connect with our schools. And as Trustee Chair McKay said, if maybe try to steal one of those Superintendent Saywell's book, we can do whatever we want, but we can't do everything we want. And that came to mind because the board obviously has a number of competing priorities with limited resources. And the message that I've heard loud and clear from staff is we need to focus on our most vulnerable students. So I do support that. But I do also want to piggyback on what Trustee Higginson had said. I thought it was a great idea, and maybe there's room in this budget to support it. And that would be putting some money aside to do, I might have the terminology wrong, but essentially a marketplace study for EAs to determine the root of the issue as to why we're having challenges filling and backfilling these EA positions, so that in future budget years we can prepare ourselves to be able to address it. Because as we've heard, I would like to see more EA hours, and I'm sure the rest of the board would as well. But what I'm hearing is it's not just a resource issue right now. There's more to it that we don't, maybe don't, and this is a bit of an assumption on my end, but maybe don't have a fulsome understanding of what's required to solve the problem. So I think what would be great to see, and maybe Mark, this is coming to my question, Charlene, through to staff, is this something that could come through this budget to set aside an amount for a study of some kind? Or is this something that will get funded through surplus? How could the board, in other words, support this to ensure that it moves forward? And when I say this, I mean a marketplace study looking at the issues with respect to filling and backfilling, failure to fills for EA supports in the classes.
Sure. Through Chair, I would suggest that the funding required for that wouldn't be required to be passed as a motion to adjust the budget as it stands. I think I mentioned that within, for instance, my budget or the superintendent's budget, there's often items that we require, consultants or extra help on in a given year that we do have a little bit of flexibility on a year-to-year basis. So if the board ends up getting a priority, we'd be able to support that. So, barring it being like a $60,000 study, if that was the priority of the board, we would, I'm confident that without the need to significant budgetary reallocations, we'd be able to do that.
You have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. Thank you through the chair to Secretary Treasurer Walsh. So my follow-up is just this, perhaps to the chair. I know we have a very busy work plan this year, but is this something that we could somehow prioritize and get included just because of the you know, at least from my perspective, the importance of this issue.
Thanks, Greg. I actually have just written myself a note that we would focus on having something come back to June. I don't know if it's going to be an open or closed issue as it relates to labor, but likely to have some type of plan presented to the board on this topic so that we can make a decision about how to move forward in looking at this issue. Yes, that's a commitment I can make. So.
Thank you.
Elaine.
Hi. Can you hear me? I just want to say, like, I support this tier 3 programming because I see it as a, you know, equivalent to the alternative education programming, where the goal is always to get kids back into the mainstream. But when you know, we're hearing all the time that these kids are, like Carrie said, 1-on-1, 2-on-1, 3-on-1, like that, I truly believe will alleviate some of the stressors within every level in the schools. The teacher will not have to deal with that in that moment, and then the child will be integrated back and it will be successful for everyone, as opposed to it just being, you know, a stress. And so, like, I truly do see that at every level, this would be beneficial for every person involved. And I think of even the parents of, you know, kids in classrooms. You know, you're having those conversations, and everybody's had that conversation where it's like, there's this, you know, one student in the classroom, and you know, they don't know that student, they just care about their student and their child who's not getting an education because of something that's happening, and that's not okay either. But we also need to support those kids, and to me, that is like, that's the answer to it right now, like to be able to have them in an intensive setting, to be able to support them and have them feel successful, and then the ultimate goal is always to integrate them back. So like, I see it as a way to be able to do almost everything that we want to do in, you know, in a way that we can successfully do it right now. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you. Jessica?
But nicely said, Elaine. I kind of agree and I kind of don't. I'm going to talk about that, but I want to say first this is that I want to acknowledge that we are actually not in a terrible position, and we are really lucky that we're not in a terrible position like a lot of other school districts, and that I'm really grateful for staff, that we are not in a deficit position and we're not having to make cuts, because that is terrible. So I'm really happy that we're not having to do that. However, we are in a position where the ministry is not adequately funding the mandate of inclusion, so we're having to make decisions because the mandate of inclusion is not adequately funded. So I want to put that out there publicly to maybe like Karen's mom, who apparently watches this occasionally, but I like, for the reasons Elaine said, I like the idea of the model, or the program. It's not a model, it's a program. But I'm not convinced that now is a good time. And I have a question. I need to tell you why I'm having this question. And that's because I feel like we're in a time, you know, coming out of the pandemic, lots of stressors, you know, we're kind of all just hanging on. And we heard about morale among staff. We heard about burnout on staff. We know we have high failure to fill rates. People are really struggling. And you know, families and students and all that. So I'm not convinced that now is a great time to implement a new program that involves having an administrator versus, you know, what that communicates to people in the schools when they're kind of saying, hey, we really need some help here. So for me, given that the stressors that have been happening, I want to know if there's been an evaluation, or so is there any data? Has there been any evaluation? Do we have any information about the mental health levels in our schools? Increased behavioral problems, you know, like, and not just among students, but I'm also really wondering about staff, because I'm actually wondering about the impact that a new program is going to have on staff when they're telling us that they're really struggling, and that they've asked for more people in the schools. So that's one of my big questions is, you know, how are we doing from a mental health perspective? Do we have data? Have we evaluated this? Because I know that if I would want to have that information, because then I would argue, you know, why we need to address that now. And so that, yeah, that's my question is do we have any data? Have we done any evaluation on mental health levels in schools in relation to considering allocating on the budget?
Who would like to take first turn to that question?
And do I need to repeat it in a clear way?
No, okay, go ahead, Don, thanks.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question, and I don't think what I was thinking a little bit while you were answering that question around a tier 3 intervention program for our K-7 students is in learning services. We've had lots of conversations around meeting the needs of students during the pandemic and students who have been unable to attend and unable to engage and unable to cope with the regular setting of a school. And at the secondary level, we have some specialty programs in the district that have met some of those needs. Our FLOW program, our Learning Alternatives program. There's been a landing spot for some students to re-engage with their education that in models at the secondary level that just aren't there at our K-7 programming. And while our secondary schools are working hard to provide more tier 3 supports at each of their schools, there is that opportunity to say, you know what, I think FLOW, there's 12 students, you know, some of them spend part of the year there, then they transition back to the regular program. There are some opportunities at secondary that there have not been at the elementary level. And as Director Steele has mentioned, this has been probably more than a 3-year conversation, right? There's been a need pre-pandemic. It's just during the pandemic, it really has created that challenge to say, can we have each and every one of our elementary schools meet the needs of those their most complex learners with diverse needs? And the answer has been no. And I think this program is an opportunity to kind of, it's a starting point, right? To say this is where we can get things going, and it may evolve into tier 3 supports at each of our schools and those staff being able to meet the needs. But just having been part of these many conversations, knowing that there's been an absence of an opportunity in our K-7 programming to meet these needs, I think this is it feels right from where I sit, because I've seen students at the secondary level not being able to handle the you know, as Carrie has said, that constant buzz of a big building with lots of people and lots of challenges in being there for a full day. And some secondary programming have allowed for some shortened days, some later start times, some quieter settings, some less adults interacting with them. It's met their needs. If you ask those students, they're like, it's been their lifeline to re-engaging with their education and getting them back on track. And so I feel like it's the right thing to do. The mental health piece, I don't have the quantitative data. We haven't done a survey, but in all corners of the organization, I think people have recognized the need to provide supports for our mental wellness of our adults who are taking care of our kids, and the kids' mental wellness as well.
If I might add on a little piece too, I think, I mean, one of the things that we've done a lot of learning around this year is the notion of a compassionate learning system. And, you know, when we think about adult mental health and we're talking about educators and support staff and the people that work with our kids in schools every day, one of the things we know is that wrapping around the people who take care of the kids is really, really important. And so we have spent a lot of time trying to listen to school teams and understand some of the pressures and things that are impacting this year. And I do think, you know, some of the issues with failure to fill, we do have some people that are, it's been a long 2 years, right? And you know, everybody's individual resilience isn't what it was pre-pandemic. We need some time to heal together and get our energy back and just come on the other side of this fatigue and heaviness that's been sitting over our community for so long. And one of the things that I know is impacting a number of our school teams is that the amount of compassion and empathy and care and support and the hours of planning and data collection and tweaking and parent meetings and meetings with doctors, and like we have some teams that have put in countless hours of really intentional work and they're not getting out in front of the supports they need for the children that they're providing for. We still have EAs who are getting hurt. We still have principals who can't get anywhere near their office because they are the extra EA every day. We have classroom teachers that are exhausted because they're trying to provide support for children that's not developmentally meeting their needs. So even though they're working really hard and doing lots of intentional things, it's not making the difference that they wish they could make for that child and their family. And so I think having another option, and I do agree with what Assistant Superintendent Malcolm was saying about options at secondary that aren't currently present at the elementary level. We don't have other things to offer some of those school teams right now other than joining them with the feelings of empathy and care and concern, right? We want to do something that's actionable, that's an intervention that can make a difference, not just for the student, but also so the adults feel like they're making a difference, like their contributions are moving the child and the children in their care forward in a really productive, supportive way. It's really hard to go to work every day and feel like what you're doing isn't helping, right? Even when you're working really, really hard with everything in your toolkit. And I don't think that's the fault of the adults that are providing the care for these children. I think they're doing everything they can with the resources currently available to them. We want to add to their toolkit to create some space and have them feel more effective in their work.
Not a survey.
Do you have, well, okay, I'm confused. In the sense that maybe I've misheard it, but I thought that this was for students that weren't currently in the school system, at least when we start off. And so.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But when I look at the kids on the outreach caseload, the school teams are still very involved with those children, right? Like we have had unsuccessful attempts to bring some of those kids back to school. They've arrived and the dysregulation they've experienced or the distress that they've experienced is really significant, and it is impactful on the schools. And then, the kids come and they go and they're here for a little bit, or we manage to get them back for an hour a day, but that's all they can manage right now. And we know that their parents wish more for them. So do we, right? And it's so I do think that there's a layer of pressure and stress, and it's discouraging to work really, really hard and feel like you're not moving forward. And so you're right. I am talking about two populations of kids at the same time, because I think I'm thinking about the now and I'm thinking about the possibilities for the future for sure. But even our children who are not attending, lots of people at school are doing lots of things on a fairly regular basis. I mean, daily basis in some cases. And yeah, when the calls come to district office, they're saying, what else can we do? Right? We've exhausted the things that we have access to. What else can we do? And so we're just trying to add a layer to the possibilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. I said it last time. I'll try to say it again and try to remember if I can say it as well as I did last time. I know some of these kids. These are the kids who, as Miss Steele said, are the ones who at any given moment are like a stick of dynamite, and 1 minute they're fine and the next minute they're throwing a desk. And what that does to an environment, and I've worked in a school with these children, is they're not exaggerating. Everybody's on eggshells. And then the counselors and the EAs and the people and the learning assistance teachers can't be fully present with the children they're working with in that learning assistance room, trying to teach these kids who need extra help in reading, because they're waiting for the explosion in the hallway when that piece of dynamite goes off. These children need this. This will give more time for our learning assistants and for our counselors, and even for good music programs and good language programs, because we're not afraid of a work safe complaint because that kid throws a desk and injures somebody. And I hate saying it, but I'm going to tell you something. I was that child. I know I threw a desk at somebody one time in school in grade 4-ish. I don't remember what it was that triggered me. But these are children with incredibly complex needs, and we are not helping them trying to pound these square pegs with these round holes of a classroom of 22 and 24 kids. We just aren't. We're not helping anybody.
Elaine.
That's hard to follow. I agree. That's exactly how I feel about that as well. And I don't even know, I lost my train of thought. I don't even know what else I was gonna say, but, you know, I think it's just the same kind of thing. I think that, you know, when I think of the, you know, complaints that we've had coming up and things like that, it's frustrated parents who just want their kids in school. And, you know, and then we're looking at the safety of everyone, we're looking at the needs of everyone. And this is the answer to that as far as I'm concerned. Like that is, yes, your child can be in school. We want them in a safe environment. We want wraparound supports. We want to be able to support them in a safe manner to eventually get back to that, which is what they want, right? So to me, that's a win-win.
Stephanie?
Thanks. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to support this recommendation. And it's been through a lot of nail biting. And it's, you know, for a lot of the reasons that have already been said, but here's one thing that I would really like to ask. There's been a lot of requests for data that have not been answered. And if we're going to support something that is on the verge of being controversial in some people's minds, and it's going to cost us money because we're going to have to decide probably in a couple of years, we might not be in this position and we're going to have to start deciding what are we going to change? What are we not going to change? And I want to be able to support this and I want to be able to show people that it's working. So I would really appreciate it if in a year we had a report on this that said, here's how many crisis interventions we had a year ago, here's how many we don't have now or have had this year. Here's how many of these students were out of school when we started this program. Here's how many hours they're in school. I want to see us monitoring it and I want to see it working so that in a year we can say, yes, expand it. Let's make it bigger. Let's focus this because I do agree that we are in a very, very difficult place when it comes to inclusion and the inclusion mandate. And I appreciate that we're trying to think outside the box and we're trying to serve these needs in a way that does get the most bang for your buck, does allow staff to be focused in the right areas. But I do request that I would like to see this, I would like to see it in a year. Like, I want to see us tracking this. I want us to monitor it and I want us to show that it's working. And if it's not working, it's okay. We just need to then revisit it. But I just want to be able to look at the information and be able to support the program fully and completely. So my request with my support is that we do keep, you know, rigorous data on this program and we monitor its success so that we can adjust it if necessary and hopefully provide more resources to it to expand in a way that meets more students' needs.
Writing myself a note. I'm not gonna call that a speaker until I write this down.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson's absolutely right, and I'm going to put it on right out here right now. I will be the first person to be making a motion to kill this program in a year if we don't get that down.
Okay, so just for the record, I wrote down that we're gonna.
If I'm still here now, if God willing,
Hold on,
yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah, that's my first comment. My second comment is there is also Jess made a point that is very good that got lost. There's an obligation for us as a board to continue to make sure the ministry knows that we as a province, not just as a district, as a province are dropping the ball on this topic of inclusion because every district in this province, I've talked to my fellow trustees when I was at AGM, is having the same struggles we have with parents who want their children there all day and it's not working and we're not doing it. We're not getting it done. And the last thing I think I wanted to say, and because I'm getting a little emotional here because I am passionate about this subject, and doing this doing this properly is, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. You know, we, you know, I had another thing, I think, but I've lost it. But we have to do all this work. We have to look at how do we get more counselors? Why don't people want to become counselors? That's another labor market thing I think we have to look at. And it's, again, a province-wide conversation. But we can't, we have an opportunity here to try something, and I think we should try it. And I'll shut up now. 29.
Thank you, Dennis. For the passion, not the being quiet. Chantal. Oh. Chantal's
Thank you, Chair. And I've done a lot of listening in tonight, and I appreciate all the passion that's been spoken. Yeah, I mean, the world is so freaking complex these days. And I just, you know, I'll say to pick up or reiterate some of the things that I've heard as well in my, you know, short time on this board, hearing time and time again of the need of EAs and the value that we place in EAs and the struggles we have in filling those spaces. But the other piece, and I'm glad it's been raised, is around data, right? It's been data, more, give us more data. And I think that this is one of the most important places where we can land moving forward. I support this. You know, I have faith in the process, in the ability of you to make some, you know, very creative decisions in a really awful place to have to be, where resources are stretched thin. But on that note as well, hearing how some of other districts, what other districts are facing right now, we should pride ourselves a bit in where we are at. So the faith that I have in supporting this budget is that this plan will, in fact, by, you know, our ability to support this tier approach, better utilize the resources in the school, which better supports the students and teachers in the school, also the school as it exists. Because I know I've gone through a number of schools, again, in my short time here, and it is rare I see a principal sitting at their office desk. I just, you know, again, a very complex time, not easy decisions to be made. And I think this board has said time and time again that we'll continue to, you know, advocate that ultimately this falls on the ministry, the province to fund, to, you know, step up when it comes to inclusion and making sure that all of our students are supported, and all of the work that the folks in this room do is supported, and our teachers and our supports in the schools all are positively impacted by that. So I'll be supporting this, and I really do appreciate all the, again, you know, tougher questions that have been asked, the way everyone is open to being more creative and trying to find solutions to get at the term of the night the best bang for our buck. So thank you.
Yeah, I've heard some, last word to say, but some fantastic debates, comments from both sides of the equation, and I just appreciate them all, because I see perspectives. I think I know that Trustee Sammy mentioned you know, about the staff and the morale, and asking about mental health. And these are all things that I'm hearing, and I feel like, you know, ultimately we're here for the children. But if the staff don't feel heard, they don't feel valued. And that's my concern. And I know there is a counseling crisis, like, we struggle to fill positions in the high school. We need more counseling time. We've addressed the EA situation. I think it looks like we're gonna be doing something with that, but you know, I know from the mental health perspective, we could use more CYC workers in our school system. But you know, I feel like if I can vote for this budget, it would be because we say we're going to evaluate this program after a year. Because I really feel we should be evaluating all the programs that we're doing on a regular basis. So I think Carrie gave some impassioned points, and so I think I will support this proposal for this year. Thank you for everyone's comments.
Thank you, Naomi. Well, you've reached the end of my speakers list, which I was very careful keeping the singing. So. Oh, just kidding. Greg, your turn.
Sorry, one more. So I want to just raise another concern about the budget that I'm hoping that we can find a solution to. And that's the possibility, I'll say, of bringing the school crossing guard into the budget for Nicole North Oyster. And the reason I bring this forward is it's a relatively minor expense in the grand scheme of things. We've already been told that, you know, we're taking a fairly conservative approach to our budget, and this issue of traffic safety is not going to resolve itself in the short term. This is what happens, folks, when we place schools in the middle of rural areas that you have to drive to and don't have adequate parking or roadside conditions. That's just the unfortunate reality. So this is not, you know, when we talk traffic safety and with this particular school and the parents having concerns with their kids coming on and off the school grounds, this isn't going to mysteriously or magically go away. So I guess my ask would be, is the board willing to support including this on an ongoing basis until we come up with a permanent solution? This, like I said, I do not believe that this will be solved overnight, in a year, in 2 years. This is an ongoing thing that's probably not going to go away.
Mark, I'm gonna let you maybe give us the first attempt at it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we've mentioned previously that we anticipate this item, as we've heard from the board a number of times, to be coming forward in the September surplus. I think as the number is relatively low, and we have not yet instituted some of our traffic calming measures, or some of the things that we were going to do at the school, because there's still some conversations to do with stakeholders at the level. We didn't propose it as a permanent addition because, again, we do think that there's some board initiated, the board supported a fairly significant investment at that school for traffic safety. So that's the reason that didn't come forward that way. In addition, it's relatively easy to staff that in the event that the board supports it in September, so to get it off the ground quite quickly. So that's the reasoning that we did not add it to the base budget, and as well as just the concern that once it's in, it will stay, even if it changes. And in fact, we would have, looking at the routes that exist currently, we would almost hope that they would have been year to year, but they've been around for so long. So that was the thinking behind that.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, so I guess my question to the board would be, do we support including this into the budget? Because my understanding would be that if we did institute traffic calming measures, that we could then revisit this at some point in the future, rather than having to debate it every year if we have a surplus.
How about I start with asking another question? It's for our Secretary Treasurer. I don't have the document in front of me. But the outreach program, I believe, is planned to be budgeted with surplus prior to the end of June, correct? Like we're expecting to have a certain amount of money, we're gonna budget, summer outreach out of that money. Oh, there's a note here, this might be very helpful. Okay, so funded by restricted surplus. Do you need a motion from us to fund that position from restricted surplus now so that the school community can know what's happening in September? Before the end of June. Before September, frankly.
So, sorry, I saw the superintendent pop on. Should I respond, or Scott, or do you?
Well, it gets, we agreed to fund a small amount through surplus in that budget to ensure the outreach program went. My question would be the same to you, Mark. I popped on to support you, I guess, in that decision. I don't know what the actual cost is of that crossing guard.
Sure. So if that's the main priority of the board, I mean, there's two questions. With respect, I think what I would recommend as a staff member contemplating just the easiest way forward, if the board was interested in it, I would actually, assuming the board's happy with the rest of the budget, I would pass the budget as is, because for the $7,000 to $12,000 or whatever it is, there's actually going to be a significant amount of work to change the actual budget. So just from a staff perspective, the time that will take will be significant. Again, shouldn't necessarily stop. That doesn't need to be front and center. If there was a priority to the board, however, if a motion that said to the board or to staff that to staff that utilizing that surplus kind of after the budget is passed, then the board would see it in the amended annual budget. And then I guess the second part of that would be added to the ongoing budget in the future year. So that's what I would suggest is pass now, put the motion to add that item from the appropriate place. We come back with the amended annual budget. The school gets the funds in September, you come back next January, you see it in the budget, and then if the board's wish is to have it ongoing built into the budget, that's where we would do so for next year. So for instance, if the board said right now, add $12,000 to the budget, we either need to cut something or change our assumptions with respect to revenue.
Okay.
Unrestrict and then restrict, and we change our budget amount, we change our bylaw amount, we change everything. So for that amount of money, I think that the board's motion would be sufficient.
Okay, I have a plan, and it does not include everybody redoing the budget. Hopefully Marty can hear me now. The answer to Greg's question, I believe, is let's talk about this again in a couple of weeks. And we can, we talked about the EA piece, we're gonna bring that back in June. This is a piece that we can come back to in June so that we have a plan for September, but we can do it outside of the budget right now. And for me, that's where I would land with this. I would not add it to the budget tonight. I'm not there. I would give it another year. You would get my support for another year out of surplus funds or something like that, so that we could figure out the process that's been undertaken for traffic safety. But that could be separate in a couple of weeks, not in September. And I think that's the piece that I was worried about, is I'd like that decision by the board before the end of June, so that families know what to expect in September. Yeah. So, does that make sense? Great.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, yes, I thank you for that solution. My biggest concern was making sure that parents knew what to expect in September, and perhaps we could at some point, if needed, bring back the conversation around support for the traffic calming measures at the same time. So maybe we can tie them together if it's appropriate. Because I do think that something needs to be done, but that's going to take some time with the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure and the partner groups as well.
Awesome, thank you. So I think we found a solution that will lead us back to another valuable conversation.
And I can give an update later because I've been working back around this specific too.
So 8:57. I have a few motions in my agenda package. Is there anybody that would like to move one? Okay, I'm just trying to get to. Hang on, right here. Page 4. Really, very top. Page 4. Okay. That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, give the school district number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith 2022-23 budget bylaw, all 3 readings at 1 meeting today, the 25th of May, 2022. Is there something? Jessica seconded the motion. Would you want to speak to that? No. I think I'll call the question on that motion. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? This does require unanimous vote. And the motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Is there someone that would like to read the first reading of the bylaw? Okay.
Bylaw of the Board of Education of School District number 68 in Nanaimo Ladysmith called the board to adopt the annual budget of the board for the fiscal year 2022-23 pursuant to section 113 of the School Act, RSBC 1996-412 as amended from time to time, called the Act. The board has complied with the provisions of the Act respecting to the annual budget adopted by this. Number 2, the bylaw may be cited as School District number 68, the Nanaimo Ladysmith annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2022-23. Number 3, the attached statement 2 showing the estimated revenue and expense for the 2022-2023 fiscal year and the total budget bylaw amount of $181,710,332 for the 2022-2023 fiscal year was prepared in accordance with the statement 2 from 4 and schedules 2 to 4 are adopted as the annual budget of the board for fiscal year 2022-23. Read for a first time this 25th day of May 2022.
Is there a seconder? Second motion? Elaine, did you want to speak to the motion?
No.
Anyone else? Jessica?
I actually probably just need to say this. I'm going to be opposed to this, and I'm probably the only one, but I do want to say that I want to be a red flag for the mental health in our schools. And so that's the reason, because I can tell it's passing, so there's no real risk, but I want to be that like, hey, this is a worry, and I want to know that worry. So that's why I'm opposed to the budget.
Just be quick to say that I'm going to support the budget, and I agree that it is a red flag and we have to keep monitoring it. But again, can't make, I don't want to be the person with, when we're one of the few districts who is in a position that we're not in a deficit, we're not cutting. We need to address those concerns, but that's, to me, I can't block this budget for that this time.
Any other comments or discussion on the motion? Greg?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I will be supporting this motion. I appreciate all the time that staff have put into this. I think we did make some good headway this evening with respect to our future actions in relation to EA support and advocacy. So I'm happy about that. And I'm pleased, to learn now the outcome of our Tier 3 program should the bylaw pass and how it'll support our most vulnerable students in their meeting their needs. So thank you.
Any other speakers on the motion? Call the question. Anyone opposed to the motion? Jessica is opposed to the motion. Oops. I'm seeking a motion to extend the meeting to 9 o'clock. Moved by Jessica and seconded by Tanya. Anyone opposed to that? No opposition, the motion carries. I'm looking for a reader for the second reading. Second.
a bylaw of the Board of Education, School District, that's not hard, I can hardly read. Of School District number 68 in Nanaimo Ladysmith called the board to adopt the annual budget of the board for the fiscal year 2022-23 pursuant to section 113 of the School Act, RSBC 1996 C412, as amended from time to time, called the act read for a second time this 25th of May, 25th day of May 2021. 2022. That's funny. Actually, so it's 2021,
Yeah,
but
that's-
it's 2022. Thank you.
I see that seconded by Chantel.
I'll do a third.
Okay, I'm not gonna go, no, I have no hands up, so let's just call the question on that. Anyone opposed? Justin's opposed, thank you. Now, Tanya, go ahead.
Third reading.
Third reading.
A bylaw of the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, called the board to adopt the annual budget of the board for fiscal year 2022-2023 pursuant to section 113 of the School Act, RSBC 1996 C412, as amended from time to time, called the act, read a third time, passed and adopted the 25th day of May 2022.
It's been seconded by Chantel. And so I will call the question on the third reading. Is there anyone opposed? With no one opposed, the motion carries unanimously. Minutes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Budgets are not easy in a world where there's never enough.
Thank you.
So, unfinished business. I do not have any unfinished business for you this evening. There's no new business for you this evening. For information, board motions report, trustee committee reports are attached for information. Are there any questions this evening? No questions this evening. So Jessica is motioning to adjourn, seconded by Tanya. Is there any opposition? Meeting's adjourned at 9:03. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.